right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are breaking down what has to be one of the most electric knockout matches of the tournament so far. We're talking, of course, about France's absolutely dominant 3-0 victory over Sweden in the round of 32. But honestly, more than just the team win, we really need to dissect what was, literally, a complete and utter masterclass from Kylian Mbappé. I mean, when a player on the world stage just decides to grab a match by the scruff of the neck, it's a phenomenal thing to witness. And that is exactly what we're going to map out for you today.
So just to give you the immediate headline of how this whole thing played out, France didn't just beat Sweden. They systematically dismantled them, 3-0. And in the process, Mbappé didn't just score, he catapulted himself right to the very top of the Golden Boot standings. We're going to look at his breathtaking third goal, which, spoiler alert, is a massive highlight of the tournament so far. Plus, we'll analyze how Michael Olise acted as this incredible tactical metronome, just masterfully pulling the strings and controlling the tempo from the midfield. But before we get to the goals, we've got to set the stage, right? How did these two teams even arrive at this moment? Well, take France. They came into this match looking like an absolute juggernaut. They'd already racked up 10 goals with dominant wins over Norway, Iraq, and Senegal. And get this, they were doing it all under the guidance of stand-in coach Guy Steffen, since Didier Deschamps was out recovering from back surgery. Now contrast that with Sweden. They took a totally different path, barely qualifying from third place in their group after a really mixed bag of results. Because of that grueling group stage, their coach Graham Potter made a super bold tactical call. He heavily rotated his squad, notably leaving his superstar strikers Erling Haaland and Alexander Isak sitting right on the bench to rest them for potential later rounds. Okay, let's dive into this first half, because I'll tell you right now, the final scoreline, it does not tell the story of the first 45 minutes. France came out flying, but Swedish goalkeeper Jakob Zetterström basically decided he was going to build a brick wall across his goal line. The guy almost single-handedly kept his team in the game. We're talking a brilliant fingertip save over the bar, followed up by this spectacular diving save to deny a total laser of a shot from Michael Olise. Even Mbappé was getting frustrated. His early attempts were either going wide or just getting expertly shut out by the Swedish keeper. Honestly, it was the kind of performance that serves as a massive, glowing audition for a blockbuster Premier League transfer. And that brings us to this absolutely crucial summary of the first half. Against the run of play, Sweden was surviving. You really have to picture the sheer tension inside that stadium. France's expected goals were already climbing off the charts. They were totally dominating possession, creating chance after chance, and pinning Sweden deep, deep in their own half. The pressure was literally suffocating. And yet, as the clock ticked closer and closer to halftime, that 0-0 scoreline just stubbornly hung around. The Swedish defensive wall, completely anchored by Zetterström, was bending violently, but it just wasn't breaking. So looking across the timeline of the match, you can pinpoint exactly when the floodgates finally opened. The entire complexion of this game pivots right on the absolute edge of halftime. We go from this frustrating, nail-biting stalemate to a really rapid unraveling for Sweden. First, there's the breakthrough right before the whistle, then the structural collapse of Sweden in the second half that leads to the second goal, and finally, the absolute crowning jewel of the match arriving late in the game. Let's zoom in on that critical turning point. It's the 45th minute. We are deep into first-half stoppage time. The whistle is, seconds away? Sweden is practically tasting the relief of getting into the dressing room at 0-0. But then, Kylian Mbappé picks up the ball on the left side of the penalty box. In a total flash of footwork, he jinks inside, completely freezing the defender in his tracks and just hammers home the opening goal. Bam! 1-0. It was a devastating psychological blow to Sweden. I mean, surviving for 45 minutes takes an immense physical and mental toll. To have your clean sheet shattered literally seconds before the break, it completely rewrites the tactical reality for the second half.
And wow, did that tactical reality shift drastically when the teams re-emerged. Down 1-0 in a knockout game, Graham Potter's side couldn't just sit back and absorb pressure anymore, right? They had to push forward. They had to search for an equalizer. But by opening up, they left these massive, gaping holes in their defensive structure. And France, they ruthlessly exploited this. Michael Olise, scanning the field like an elite quarterback, spots Bradley Barcola in the box. Barcola receives the pass and, with an almost insulting lack of fuss, just casually roofs the ball into the net to make it 2-0. At that point, the structural discipline Sweden had in the first half, officially gone.
Now, what's really interesting about this next sequence is breaking down arguably the goal of the tournament, step by step. Because at 2-0, Mbappé basically decided to put on a show. Step 1. He picks up the ball deep inside his own half and just turns on the afterburners. Executing a terrifying burst of speed toward the edge of the Swedish box. Step 2. Rather than going it entirely alone, he orchestrates this lightning-fast give-and-go sequence with both Barcola and Olise, totally disorienting the retreating defenders. And finally, Step 3. He gets the ball back and finishes with that trademark, clinical, sweeping motion. It was a 10 out of 10 display of individual brilliance, perfectly combined with flawless team chemistry.
And the underlying data here brilliantly illustrates the reality behind the final score. If you were ever wondering if a 3-0 scoreline was somehow flattering to France, the stats completely validate their absolute dominance. Just look at the expected goals. France sits towering at 3.18. Sweden, on the other hand, generated a meager 0.66. Zetterström's heroics definitely kept things looking close early on for sure, but the math tells us that France was methodically and inevitably overwhelming their opponents right from the very first whistle. Which brings us to a really incredibly important number. 6. 6 goals. In a tournament where scoring even once is literally a lifelong dream for most professional athletes. Kylian Mbappé has already found the back of the net 6 times. This isn't just a streak of good form, folks. It is a sustained campaign of offensive terror against the world's best defenses. It just completely cements his status as a player operating on a totally different wavelength than almost anyone else on the pitch right now.
But 6 goals actually creates a really fascinating situation at the top of the leaderboard because Mbappé isn't the only one with 6 goals. Lionel Messi also sits at exactly 6. So how do we determine the leader? Well, this is where the tournament's tiebreaker rules come into play. When goals are tied, the Golden Boot race looks directly at assists, and alongside his 6 goals, Mbappé has provided 2 absolutely crucial assists, whereas Messi currently has 0. It just goes to show you Mbappé isn't just a finisher, he is a vital creator in this French lineup. So the really crucial takeaway here is that Mbappé isn't doing this in a vacuum. He's the tip of a very sharp spear. Just think about this devastating attacking trio. You've got Mbappé providing the unmatched individual brilliance, right? But right next to him is Michael Olise. The Bayern Munich winger is an absolute machine out there, acting as a consistent second key man for France. He delivered 2 assists in this match alone. And then you add Ousmane Dembélé to the mix, whose pace and width just stretch defenses to their absolute breaking point, perfectly rounding out the attack. Together, this trio is a literal tactical nightmare for any opposition coach trying to game plan against them. With Sweden now in the rearview mirror, the bracket moves forward. Up next for this French juggernaut in the round of 16 is Paraguay. And look, if you think this is going to be a simple walkover for France, you might want to think again. Paraguay is riding a massive wave of momentum right now because they just pulled off an unbelievable upset, knocking out Germany in a penalty shootout. They're going to come into this match battle-tested, highly resilient, and completely unafraid of European heavyweights. It seriously sets the stage for a truly fascinating tactical clash. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought to close out our explainer today. We've just watched a French team that looks incredibly united in the dressing room, they're playing freely on the pitch, and they are producing moments of just sheer brilliance. With 10 goals in 4 matches, and the underlying stats to completely validate their dominance, the question the entire footballing world is asking right now is simply this: can anyone actually stop France? It's the ultimate puzzle every remaining team has to solve, and I honestly can't wait to see who, if anyone, steps up to the challenge. Thanks so much for joining me for this breakdown, and keep your eyes peeled for the next round.